Welcome to the Stronger Than Autoimmune Podcast. As an autoimmune warrior myself, I understand living with chronic illness isn't easy. You're not alone. This podcast was made to bring hope. I will interview individuals living with autoimmunity along with businesses and experts to provide knowledge and support. As an autoimmune coach, I understand there is no cure for autoimmune disease, but lifestyle changes can influence how we feel. So join me on being stronger than autoimmune. And shout out to all the listeners out there, because without you, this podcast would not be possible. So how can you support the podcast? I'm glad you asked. There are 3 ways to support the podcast. 1, rate on Spotify. 2, review on Apple. 3, share with a fellow autoimmune warrior so they too can have hope and be stronger than autoimmune. So let's get started. Guess who I just connected with, warriors? Leap Cure. Leap what? Leap Cure. Leap Cure connects patients with clinical trials to make research more equitable and efficient. Listen to their latest clinical trial.
If you've been diagnosed with thyroid eye disease and are seeking potential new treatment options, you might be interested in the LIDS clinical trial. If you're 18 and over, have a diagnosis of Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, and are interested in potentially participating in research, you can fill out a short questionnaire at lpcur.com/TED. You'll be connected with someone on the team to determine whether it might be a good fit for you. Check your eligibility and learn more at lpcur.com/TED.
Hello, warriors. Today's episode features Sally Fallon Morell. She is best known as the author of Nourishing Traditions, a guide and a cookbook that dispels myths like animal fats and cholesterol are not villains, but vital factors in the diet. She's also the founding president of the Weston A Price Foundation and editor of the foundation's quarterly magazine. In 1998, she started a campaign for real milk. Sally and her husband in 2009 purchased a farm in southern Maryland. The farm does not use corn, soy, GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, hormones, or antibiotics. Sally received a bachelor's degree in English with honors from Stanford University and a master's degree in English with honors from UCLA. She speaks French and Spanish. Her interests include music, gardening, metaphysics, and of course, cooking. I urge you all to join the foundation and buy the Nourishing Traditions book. The links will be in the show notes, and I hope you enjoy the interview. All right. Well, welcome, Sally Fallon Morell. You are a best-known author of Nourishing Traditions, a guide and a cookbook, but also you started a wonderful organization that gives everybody so much information. And everything all started because you gave us this book, or you wanted to try to get healthier yourself. And I've been really looking forward to this conversation. You are a powerhouse to be reckoned with, and you keep on creating more and more foundations or organizations like the Real Campaign for Milk. And
for real milk, yes.
Yeah, for real milk. And so let's get started. Thank you for joining me on the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. So I guess the best way to start is at the beginning. What was your health like before integrating nutrition into your life?
Well, I would say I've always been fairly healthy. I grew up on a whole foods diet. My mother was a very good cook. We always had butter. Well, we didn't have cod liver oil, and we didn't have raw milk. But like so many young people, I was tired all the time. I had allergies, fatigue. And the first thing I discovered was that if I ate plenty of fat with my meals, and that wasn't hard for me, I loved butter. Anyway, so that I didn't have that letdown between meals, my allergies got a lot better, and my fatigue got a lot better. So that was my first discovery, and that was sort of on my own. But then I discovered Dr. Price's work in 1974. I read his book and applied that to my own life and raising my children. And, I just proved to myself that it worked, that this diet really worked.
Yeah. And what I found fascinating, because I took a peek at that book, and it's not an easy read, and it's not like there's recipes. So how did you...
Book,
yeah, Dr. Price's book.
The idea was to create a cookbook that brought Dr. Price's findings. He just made them more practical and more accessible.
Yeah. So how did you even start, or what made you even read his book? Because it's not like...
it's a fascinating book, and I've always been interested in health, and so I find the book fascinating to read, but it is a long book, and the kind of pith of the book you don't get to that till chapter 22, and a lot of people give up before then.
Yeah. Well, the pictures say a beautiful story, and for people that are...
words, yes.
It is. Personally, for me, I had to have braces, and
I did too. And
you did
my kids did not need braces, and that's exactly what he said. It's the diet of the parents when the child is in the womb that basically determines the shape of the face and the width of the dental arches.
Oh, wow. So really taking that into, but you had to really go from his book, and then how did you even start with, I know you ate real butter, but how did you even create some of these recipes? Because there's not like these people made it this way. How did you even start this research?
I like to cook. I was a cook. I cooked for my family. I collected recipes. I had taken French cooking. So I'd done all those things. But there were some that I did have to create. So first of all, I delved into the proper preparation of grains. And Nourishing Traditions was the book that introduced this concept to the public, that grains are very hard to digest, and you really need to prepare them properly, and by soaking or fermenting. And all traditional cultures did this to their grains. So I had to go back and kind of start from scratch. Well, how are we going to do this? And I developed the pancake recipe, the oatmeal recipe, and then all of the other recipes that followed, just using this principle. Same things with the lacto-fermented foods. So all traditional cultures have fermented foods. There's just no exception. And usually it's fermented vegetables or fruits, fermented plant foods in the form of pickles and things. So I found recipes for condiments that were made with vinegar or canning or sugar or whatever, and reworked them so that they were lacto-fermented.
Yeah. And from my understanding also, your background, yes, you like to cook, but you graduated with English degree at Stanford. So
I'm an English major.
Yeah, you're an English major, but so where did the cooking come in? Did your mom involve you into...
I come from a family of foodies. We just all like to cook. So
with butter.
Yeah, right.
Did you watch what's that famous cook?
Oh,
back?
Julia Child?
Julia Child.
Yes. Well, when her book came out, you have to understand the struggle that was going on, the kind of conflict. On the one hand, you had the government telling people to have low-fat diets, no salt, high fiber, and that children should have these diets, which is a recipe for them having all kinds of problems. And so that's the kind of, and then Diet for a Small Planet, that was all part of that. But then there was this growing interest in European foods because more and more people were traveling to Europe. So this conflict there, and Julia Child's books really, threw like a little bomb into the mix. And those of us who cook this way, we just thought this book was wonderful.
Yeah, she was speaking your language.
Yes.
Yeah, and so people that are not familiar with the Weston Price book, it was a dentist that traveled because he was interested in how people had great teeth and people having crowded teeth and how that happened.
Yes.
So he's trying to...
In these traditional cultures where they were truly eating only their traditional foods, everybody had straight teeth. Nobody needed braces. They were very attractive with broad faces, and some of his photographs are just amazing at how wide the dental palate was. As soon as they started eating processed foods, the first result of that was tooth decay, causing, you can imagine, a lot of suffering, a lot of pain. But the children who were born after the parents changed their diet to Western foods, to the displacing foods of modern commerce, they looked different from their parents. They had more narrow faces and overbites, underbites, crowded teeth. And that happened in just one generation. So it wasn't crazy. Genetic. If you hold to this, genetic changes, that would take place over a long period of time. But it happened immediately.
That is crazy how, and for your own health, how was your health before you integrated this new way or traditional way of eating?
Well, I think in my case, it's just I found I had so much more energy when I was eating this way. There's a lot of emphasis on preparing foods properly so they're easy to digest. And when your foods are easy to digest, there's more energy for you. I think that is a unique contribution of Nourishing Traditions, is all the emphasis on making foods easy to digest.
Yeah. And that is part of the modern way of society, is making just everything's fast.
Yes. And the more we manipulate the food, the more we make it more convenient, the longer the shelf life, the lower the nutrient value, and the more difficult it is to digest.
Yeah. So what would you change? I mean, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about society and delivering food and preparing food and farming?
Yeah, well, it's really educating people, one person at a time. And food is a very sensitive subject. You just can't go out and lecture people about food.
Yeah.
Because they just, think you're a spoil sport or whatever. When the person is ready, they will be receptive. And usually ready means that they've gone through a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
Or they just never feel well, or they don't have energy or what. And that's when they come to us, and we're there. Yeah. But we don't try to push this on anybody.
And that's what's so wonderful about it, because I think that's how everybody, like you said, that's how they stumble upon you and your book and your foundation, Weston Price Foundation, Nourishing Traditions, because they've hit a block of, I don't know what else to do. And
it's not working. The diet that they recommend is actually designed to create cravings. So you're on this kind of puritanical diet, but you can't resist the processed foods and the sugars and everything. And what we teach people is when you're on a really nutrient-dense diet, when you are truly nourishing yourself, those cravings go away. But it takes a certain amount of will to put yourself on that path, especially if you've never prepared food for yourself before.
That's true. It's a big curve.
Yes.
And I know there's certain foundations of these foods. Like there's a raw milk, there's a lacto-fermented foods, butter. What why are those so important to nourishing our bodies, our cells?
Well, first and foremost are the animal fats. Animal fats are just absolutely essential for life, for healthy reproduction. And the animal fats carry vitamins that we can't get anywhere else, vitamins A, D, and K. And in the traditional diets, these fats were very high. And people ate a lot of fat. That's what they valued when they killed an animal. If the animal was too lean, they threw it away. They wanted the fat. And if they were cattle people, keeping people, they wanted the butter and the cream. And they ate egg yolks. They ate fish liver oils. They fished when the oysters were the fattest. I mean, they were always looking for fat. So that's what we say. The first thing is to get your fats right. And that means to completely throw out all the industrial seed oils, the spreads, the margarines, the cooking oils, the mayonnaise, the Cool Whip, all that stuff, and just get on real animal fats. So that comes number one.
And that's why I brought you onto the show, because a lot of people listening have autoimmune disease and are so fatigued they can barely get out of bed. Yeah. Would that be the first step you would tell them is throw away all those seed oils?
I would tell them to get their fats right. Just don't eat any of these industrial fats and oil, and embrace butter. Butter is the healthiest fat on the planet. So.
And it tastes so good.
Yeah. And then, of course, people who are really tired, and I would get on raw milk, because raw milk is perfect food. It totally nourishes you. It's a rich source of glutathione, which helps you detoxify. And your body doesn't have to spend an ounce of energy digesting it. As soon as the milk hits the small intestine, the enzymes are activated and it digests itself. But all of those things are destroyed when the milk is pasteurized.
Yeah. So what made pasteurization come into light? I mean...
Well, it's one of the side effects of the germ theory. And of course, we don't really subscribe to the germ theory. There's 3 things that make you sick, and not one of them is germs. What makes you sick is poor nutrition, toxins, or some kind of injury, including birth injury, or what they call, genetic problems. So where was I?
No problem.
Yeah, and germs don't make you sick, and yes, if you have your water going through sewage, there's a lot of toxins in sewage, and the bugs will be there too, but they're not where the toxins are coming from. So this idea that there were germs in the milk gave them an excuse to pasteurize. But what pasteurization really did was trap the farmer in this kind of system, where he could not sell directly to the public, so he couldn't set his price. It's a Marxist system, and farmers today are getting like $1 a gallon for their milk. It's what they got in the Second World War. It's the same price. Whereas if they're selling raw milk directly to the public, they get anywhere from $5 to $25 a gallon. So we want farmers to get a fair price for their milk, but the main reason we drink raw milk, it is such a healing food, and really a perfect food for someone suffering from fatigue.
Yeah. And thank you for mentioning all these different tools that people can be using, because, raw milk, you've made it available with your campaign to make it readily... How many states are you in now?
With a map, and anyone can find it, and it's so much more available than it used to be. Another healing food is the bone broth, and this, of course, is a great tradition in Asia for helping people get well when they've been sick, and there are good scientific reasons for this. So that's important. The fermented foods are very important to help heal the gut. The right kind of salt is important. Salt is very important in the diet, and we shouldn't be avoiding salt.
Yeah, and that's one of the first things they mention when you have heart problems. Reduce your
Oh, yeah.
salt.
No salt. And, your heart's a muscle. I mean, your heart needs salt.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you so much for bringing the Weston Price Foundation. And there's so many resources on there. I mean, what are some things that you want to continue or want to see in about 10 years or 5 years with the foundation?
Of course, we want to see it still growing, still doing what we're doing. We try to produce materials in various mediums. So everything from dense scientific articles to little flyers. We have a podcast. We have booklets. Trying to make this information available and understandable in many formats. We are working on developing a course that people can take, self-guided course on nutrition. So we're
That
in
would
the
be
very
awesome.
beginning stages, so we have a ways to go.
Yeah, because I mean, people would love to. I mean, personally, I would love to see how these recipes that you created can, I don't know. I mean, I guess I want to see more hands-on because I'm so visual.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
I mean,
a cooking class, online cooking class would be great.
yeah, yeah,
We do
that's
have a
true.
recipe
That's
blog
true.
on the website.
Okay.
We post a new recipe every week.
I would like to do that. Thank you for sharing. So I am a new member, and that's how
you.
you get your that's how the foundation continues, correct? Is through membership.
Memberships, yes. And we don't receive any money from the government or the food industry. So it's all consumer supported.
And that's the way it should be. That means
Yes, yes.
a lot of people are demanding what you're doing. And we talked about your farm. You now live in a farm since 2009. So in the, I guess, 10 plus years that you've been on the farm, what have you learned of raising animals, raising your own vegetables?
Well, farming is very difficult. I take my hat off to farmers, and what they most need is your support. We have something called the 50% campaign, where we ask people to spend 50% of their food dollars in direct purchases from farmers and artisans, because that's the only way we're going to have small farms. You can't change this whole system from the top. You can only change it from the bottom. So that's what we ask people to do. Farming is very difficult. I don't tell people lightly to go into farming. I have a lot of respect for the people who do, because it's hard work and it's hard to make a living farming.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried to grow squash once, and twice. And first I got grubs, and so I changed locations, and then I got the mildew. And I mean, I don't know how, and I don't want to spray things on my squash because I'm going to eat it. So it's different when you're growing it.
Yeah.
And to do that constantly and fight these bugs and the weather and just different things that come up. I only did it for a little while, so definitely hats off. I also know a big part of Nourishing Traditions is eating organ meat.
Yes, yes.
And not everybody's a big fan of organ meat. I know when I was younger, I would love to go to Luby's and have liver. It was probably cooked in bronc oils, but I still love liver. Yeah. But not everybody's a big fan.
Yeah, I think liver is a very important food. And there's many ways to eat it, but it's much easier to eat liver in Europe because they have these beautiful sausages with organ meats in them. And that's another of my goals, is to have some people figure this out and make the liver sausages available. A really good example is boudin, which is made in New Orleans with all kinds of organ meats in it, but it's very spicy and it's delicious, and that's what we need. We need to put the organ meats in our hot dogs. A wonderful food that we like to eat here is scrapple, which is made from the scraps of the pig when you're butchering. And our butcher makes a lovely scrapple with, no MSG or anything like that in it. And so they're, human beings have figured out how to make awful taste good, as I like to say.
Definitely an art.
So yeah, I'd love to see more of these types of products come online.
Yeah. Yeah. Why can't we have the best of both worlds? Everybody talks about, everything I like or love about food is bad for me. But why can't it taste good and be good for you?
Get to the point where the food that's good for you is the food that you love. And that's why I really stress making things taste delicious. Healthy food is not supposed to be dry and tasteless. It's something you have to force on your children. Healthy food is, moist and got butter on it, and it tastes delicious.
Yeah, yeah, I believe so. I mean, and when you're the cook, I mean, I feel like the Muppet from the Swedish Muppet, where he's like, bidorb. I don't know if you remember that Muppet from the Muppet Show. He's just throwing things in there and not knowing what to do. I guess I really need to pay attention to recipes, but and another thing that you really stress with nutrition and eating well, the right types of foods to nourish our bodies, is that malnutrition or eventually leads to mental illness.
Yes.
And depression.
Yeah, absolutely. The brain needs to be nourished just like every other organ on the body. The brain needs fat. Our brains have the highest concentration of saturated fat in the whole body. And our brains need that fat. They're not going to, your body can make these fats out of carbohydrates, but you don't want to get fat while you're nourishing your brain. So, and the brain needs a good functioning gut because there's like a nerve connection between the brain and the digestive tract. So, good nutrition really is very important for our mental health as well as our physical health.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember not only when we talked about our health, but I distinctly remember the pictures of a monkey in the Weston Price book where the monkey had looked like it was kind of shriveled up and like the bones weren't malformed because it was generation after generation of...
Yeah, I think that's towards the end of the book. He has pictures.
Yeah, the chapter 22 book.
Yeah, chapter 22. Yeah, and this happens in animals as well as humans.
Yeah, and that's the sad part, that we're doing this to it's almost like committing genocide because we're not...
to our children, yeah. And it's our responsibility to have healthy children and to know what to do. And all the primitive cultures were much wiser than we are. They understood this. They understood that you have to eat in a certain way to produce healthy children. Now, that consciousness seems to have been erased as soon as they came in contact with our foods. And the connection was lost. Now we have to regain that connection through science and not just intuitively, but making conscious decisions about how we eat.
Yeah. And that's the sad part, that a lot of this way of eating was more, I'll show my child and my child will show, their child. Yeah. It's passed down through actually talking and doing it together.
Yeah. It's not the genetics. Yeah. It's the environment. It's the food.
Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing everything that you have through your book, because without you, a lot of this knowledge wouldn't be written down.
Well, we aim to help.
Yes.
That was my goal, is to make Dr. Price's name a household name and to bring people to understand how important his work was.
And you're doing it. You're definitely doing it. And you mentioned about the raw milk. You mentioned about oils, and you mentioned about bone broth. Those are the three. If nothing else, start from there when people are the most sick and just can't get out of bed or have pain.
Yeah, get your fats right. Do the raw milk and do a lot of bone broth.
Yeah. Any other advice for people that are suffering with chronic illness, chronic pain that you can think of?
Well, it's kind of a vicious circle in many respects because you're too tired to cook, and this does take some effort. And it's not like you're spending your whole day in the kitchen, but it does take some effort. So hopefully you will be doing this with somebody who can help you. At least maybe they have to go get the milk, right? Or start the chicken broth or go out and buy the butter. But at least at first.
Yeah. No, I thank you for the tips, and that it definitely helps to bring into some hope that one thing at a time, like you said, getting support to start those different steps would be necessary. Yeah. And one more question. What are the two biggest myths to share with the audience that you want to dispel before we go?
Well, the big myth is that cholesterol and animal fats are bad. That's the big myth. And I would say the second myth is that meat and animal foods are also bad and we should have a plant-based diet. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah. So eat your meat, people.
I just wrote an article I write for the Epic Times, and the population that has the longest lifespan, you want to guess what it is?
I always heard the Okinawans.
Yeah, no. It's Hong Kong.
Really?
Hong Kong, yes. So bustling, polluted, busy Hong Kong.
How?
The longest lifespan, yes. The lifespan of women is 89 years. I mean, that's really old, right?
Yeah.
And what is the population that eats the most meat in the whole world? It's Hong Kong.
It's Hong Kong too?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
They eat over a pound of meat a day per person. So meat's not bad.
No.
Meat consumption is associated with a long life. And we need more meat consumption, not less.
And if they can live that long in that much pollution.
Exactly. It's protecting them.
Imagine if they lived somewhere, in the country. Or here.
It's Switzerland or France. I think it's Switzerland. And that's a high-fat diet. Plenty of meat, milk, cheese. Yeah, a very rich diet.
Yeah. We need to go back to that. I mean, just like I think the French, they eat a lot of meat and cheese and
fat, butter, and cream. Yeah, and they have very low rates of heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
That's called the French paradox.
Yeah, it's very sad. I think there is also.
We've got the Hong Kong paradox, all right? You can go to westonaprice.org for the Weston A. Price Foundation. We hope you'll become members and receive our journal. And we have the secondary website, realmilk.com. And then finally, my website is nourishingtraditions.com.
Yes, and it's worth every penny towards the foundation and the book. And the book is absolutely, it is worth it. It is very thick and is full of information that will help nourish your body.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. As an autoimmune coach, I know what you track on a daily basis makes a big contribution to your symptoms and flares. If you're interested in a free tracking app, go to Isla Health. And like you, I I've been hearing a lot about the health benefits of mushrooms lately, but don't care too much for the mushroom coffee. That's why I started taking BioVale Myco from Adapt Naturals. It's a blend of 8 mushrooms, including reishi, chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps, in a convenient capsule form. I get the benefits of mushrooms: more energy, sharper focus, and stronger immunity without having to give up my delicious Java. For a limited time, the folks at Adopt Naturals are offering my audience 15% off their first order. So just go ahead to adaptnaturals.com/DEZ15 to learn more and get started. Until then, stay stronger than autoimmune.